Well, this is not a headline I expected to read today, but it certainly is welcome. DOGE apparently stormed the ATF and they are demanding that they cut gun regulations. Yes. Today, I'm going to tell you everything that I know about what DOGE could be asking from the ATF, what regulations they might be cutting, and how that affects every single gun owner out there. And while the information is limited, I'm going to at least tell you what I know. And of course, there's going to be speculation as well, but I really love to hear from y'all, man. What do you think DOGE is requesting of ATF? What's the biggest thing? Maybe that's a better question. What do you think that DOGE's biggest request from the ATF was? They threw out an arbitrary number, or it seems arbitrary, but then they added on top of it. And I think the underlying message here to the ATF, well, it's still as daunting as it's been. So I'm going to fill you in. Of course, I want to hear your opinion, whatever it may be. Let's go ahead and jump right in. So of course, Elon is gone from DOGE, but they continue to run. And essentially, if you don't know, well, pretty much everybody knows what DOGE does, but essentially they are trying to make the government more efficient. Now, has it had some hiccups here and there? Absolutely. But overall, it's really nice to know what we're spending our money on, and it's really nice to know that a lot of the junk that's out there that we have spent our money on unknowingly is being cut from the government. So having that transparency is great, and deregulating, of course, is fantastic, especially when it comes to a right. And the ATF has no problem infringing upon the rights of you and me, right? And so they have hundreds of regulations that they actually are able to implement to make your rights and my rights less of a right and more like a privilege. So DOGE initially requested that 47 regulations be removed. And some people are seeing this as kind of a symbolic number to kind of coincide with President Trump being the 47th president. But then in the same report, they're saying that, well, they blew right past that and they actually went to 50 or more regulations that they want removed. Hey, while I think it's cool to kind of honor President Trump and everything he's trying to do as far as, for gun owners, I say the more the merrier. So I don't care about, lining up with the 47th president. We want more regulations lifted. And they want this done by July 4th, by the way, to coincide with the big, beautiful bill, which we need to talk about as well, but I'll save that for another. So some of the speculation is maybe kind of like an enforcement, if you will. It's not really enforcement, but verifying how many agents they're actually going to be removing. So I talked about this maybe last week, how the ATF is going to be cut down from 800 and something agents down to like less than 300. These are the guys that actually mess with FFL. So the same gun stores that you and me go to, they are the ones that are being harassed by these agents. And what's interesting about this is if they cut this, well, they're gonna cut it down to under 300, you have thousands of FFLs across the country. And so this is going to help gun owners and really help gun shops not close down, right? We need them to stay open because, like I said, we actually benefit from their services. They serve us, and of course, this being a right, you don't want to see any more gun shops closed down. This is a huge problem under Biden. So this is one of the things that some people are speculating that DOGE actually is requesting from the ATF. Another regulation that is being floated around that needs to be cleaned up or streamlined is not getting rid of background checks necessarily, but making that process much easier. Now, they're talking about actually taking the number of pages from the 4473 from 7 down to 3. Keep in mind, there's really 3 main pages of the 4473 that you fill out anyways, but essentially what they could be requesting is, you have the mental health question, you have substance use question, you have dishonorable discharge question. They're talking about combining those things into one. Then you have the arbitrary questions, which were added under the Biden administration, which basically is a repeat of question number 1. Are you the actual transferee or buyer of this firearm? And then the 2 questions below it are, hey, do you intend to sell this firearm to a felon? Or, hey, do you plan to gift this firearm to a felon? Whatever they are. They're ridiculous questions, and it just is meant to almost create confusion for a gun owner. It's just like the Social Security question, right? They put that in the 4473, right? What is your Social Security number? Well, that is not a requirement to fill that background check out. You don't have to put your social. And it does say optional, but it's not clear. So I just wonder, I think it'd be actually pretty interesting to see how many people put the social security number in there and don't even realize that they're doing it, or don't realize they don't have to do that. The background check system is broken anyways, but anything that means less information that you're having to give to the government and an easier, cleaner, simpler process for you to buy a firearm, it's a good thing. Now, here is an interesting part that I talked to my buddy Bay about, and that is the under 21 ruling that came from the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which is a harassment essentially of adults, right? 18 to 21-year-olds. And that should be a focus, especially because there's no reason that a grown adult, right? We put that number at 18. That's when you're adult, right? According to the law. So there's no reason that they should have mandatory delays and have to go through any kind of extra process in order to buy a firearm, especially considering that they're doing it in the name of a few bad apples out there that decided to, get a gun and do some kind of harm with it. And plus, I don't know if they just ignore the fact that most of the time when you have these mass tragic type of events, they end up getting a gun from like the parents or something, right? Or they end up stealing it from the parents. So you could focus on bad parenting, not gun legislation or more gun legislation on 18 to 20-year-olds that you're willing to send overseas and to die for this country, but you won't allow them to buy a firearm. And the other part of that too is a lot of these states are constitutional carry states, so they're already carrying firearms. They can carry pistols, whatever. They can be gifted them, right? They're carrying them, but they can't go into an FFL and buy them and use the same background check system that you talk about universally wanting. It's really a ridiculous system. So maybe there's some streamlining there. Another regulation that maybe DOGE is requesting that they end is actually import restrictions. So interestingly enough, Republicans were on a roll in the 80s as far as restricting certain types of guns. Of course, Reagan did it with full autos, and then Bush did it in 1989, specifying the types of parts that imported guns must be considered in order to be imported legally. So basically, any gun that's imported cannot have any more than 10 foreign-made parts. Now, the parts they're looking at are simply basically the whole gun. So flash hiders, barrels, barrel extensions, receivers, triggers, trigger housings, the four parts that make up a magazine, so the followers, the spring, the body, the floor plates, pistol grips, stocks, folding stocks. All of these parts, no imported gun can have 10 foreign parts, right? If they do, so if a gun has 16 parts, right, they got to knock it down to 10, even if these parts are necessary to the function of the firearm. So essentially, that's where you have US-made parts go into these guns. Now, I'm not opposed to US manufacturers, being able to get compliant guns in here. The problem is, why do we even have a such thing as a compliant firearm? It literally does nothing in changing the gun. Actually, what it does is it makes the process more expensive, takes longer to get these things in, and you get a less authentic gun that's capable of doing everything the original gun could do. So this is part of what DOGE may be looking at, is removing these restrictions, so when you import a gun into the United States, there's an understanding what guns do, why we have them, why they're so crucial to our Constitution and our rights, and you get somebody to import them and you sell them, and that's it, right? No compliance, no adding up arbitrary parts, no arbitrary numbers thrown out there. Maybe DOGE is getting the ATF to actually remove this type of restriction here. And again, if you care about authenticity of a firearm and maybe even can get these things cheaper, that's a good thing. This is just part of regulations that the ATF is involved in, and there's so many more. DOGE may be requesting ATF stop any new rulemaking. So anything related to FRTs and pistol braces and all that, you're done with it. Ending the indefinite record keeping may be another thing that they're looking at eliminating. Now it's 20 years. There's a proposal where they have, lifetime access to all of these records. Again, it is unconstitutional, and there should be no agency that is dictating what you and me can do when it comes to an actual right. If anything, the roles should be reversed, where we don't have an agency of the government, not yet anyways, that says, hey, there's certain words that you can't use, and we're going to regulate those words. And if you use those words out of context, well, then we can actually arrest you and fine you up to $250,000. There should be agencies in place that protect the First Amendment and the Second Amendment. And if you operate inside of the United States, you actually have to follow the Constitution of the United States, not agencies that restrict any of these rights. I mean, we're talking about hundreds of different things and regulations that the ATF has. And so the possibilities here are truly endless. And so I'm really excited to see what exactly happened in that meeting, right? And so as soon as I find that out, I promise you, I don't care what day it is, regardless of our schedule here, I will drop a video that day because I am really interested. These are just some of the things that are out there. And I'll leave you with this. What DOGE could be doing in conjunction with the DOJ is making sure that the ATF knows that as long as you're going to be here, you have one job, and that is to hunt, track down bad guys, right? Helping ICE, doing all this kind of stuff. That's your job. Gun owners, FFLs, you serve them, not the other way around. So coming up with the arbitrary rules that restrict gun owners, that put gun owners in a state of panic when it comes to FRTs and so-called ghost guns and brace pistols and all of this kind of stuff is no longer any of your concern. There could be so many different things here. I'm excited to see what actually came out of this meeting. But there you go. That's what I know so far. Of course, I'd love to hear your opinion. Whatever you think, man. Again, there's a lot on the table. I didn't even cover a smidget of the possibilities here, but these are just some of them. Let me know what you think down below. If you like what I do, consider subscribing. See you in the next one. And as always, hold them down.